She walked into the building believing she was about to restart her life. They looked at her like she had already failed. What they did not know was this: the man quietly buying the company that very week was her husband, and he was listening to every single word spoken behind those closed doors. The story begins long before the interview. It begins with Maya Lewis deciding she was finally ready to return to the world she had stepped away from, ready to rebuild, ready to stand again. But she had no idea her strength was about to be tested in ways she never expected. Maya had always carried herself with the kind of calm confidence that made other people pause at 41. With more than a decade of experience in brand strategy and product development, she knew her value, she knew her voice, she knew her work. But that morning, something in her chest tightened as she pulled into the underground parking of a newly renovated corporate tower in downtown Phoenix. She sat still for a quiet moment, fingers resting on the steering wheel, not from fear, from the weight of returning after 2 years away caring for her mother. A responsibility she never regretted, a journey that changed her more than any job ever had. She straightened herself, reached for the leather folder on the passenger seat, adjusted her charcoal blazer, and stepped into the elevator. Her heart stayed steady. Her face stayed calm. Her purpose stayed clear. Today was meant to be a beginning. The lobby of Avery Holt Consulting did not match the warmth she had envisioned. The walls were dark and white. The air felt colder than it needed to be. A modern painting hung behind the reception desk, but even the colors felt distant. What caught her attention more was the receptionist, a young woman with a sharp jawline, sleek hair, and an expression that scanned Maya from head to toe, as if evaluating her worth within the first second. Maya offered a polite greeting. "Good morning. I am here for the 10 o'clock interview with Ms. Harper." The receptionist blinked, as if waking from a thought she was not supposed to reveal. Her fingers tapped against the keyboard in slow hesitation. "Name, please." "Maya Lewis." A short pause followed, then a breath that almost sounded like disappointment. The receptionist picked up the phone, voice dropping into a hushed tone as she spoke to someone upstairs. Her eyes never left Maya, not once. Maya thanked her and sat on a bench near the window. 9:54. She always arrived early. She believed arriving early showed respect. What she felt instead was an unusual stillness in the room, like she had walked into a place pretending to be professional, but hiding something underneath. Minutes trickled by. 5.7.10, not a single other candidate appeared. No. Staff passed through, just silence and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. At 10:11, the glass hallway doors slid open, and a tall man in a tailored navy suit stepped out. He did not look at her at first. When his eyes finally landed on her, confusion flickered across his face, quick but visible, as if he had been expecting someone with a different image in mind. "Ms. Lewis," he said. She stood, maintaining her calm. "Yes, I am Arendelle, Senior Brand Director. I will be sitting in with Ms. Harper." Today, he did not offer a handshake. He simply turned and gestured for her to follow. The walk through the hallway felt colder than the lobby. No conversation, no courtesy, only the squeak of his polished shoes leading the way. Inside the conference room, Ms. Harper waited with a laptop open in front of her. Ruth Harper had sharp eyes and a voice that carried more judgment than interest. She did not stand. She did not smile. She simply said, "Let us begin." The questions came quick and clipped. Not curious questions. Not skill-based. Questions meant to unsettle. Questions layered with doubt. Are you certain this is the role you applied for? How comfortable are you with advanced data platforms? Have you ever led a department of this size? Why the 2-year gap in employment? Maya answered each one with clarity. But she felt something else beneath the surface, a tone that pushed against her. It's not to test her knowledge, but to challenge her right to be there at all. When she mentioned her experience handling global brand accounts, Harper leaned back slightly with a raised brow. "Global. From where? Hong Kong, Montreal, Berlin?" Ms. Harper tapped. her pen once on the desk, we see. There was nothing welcoming in her voice, nothing neutral, only suspicion. 15 minutes in, Garayon closed his notebook with a finality that felt planned. "Actually," he said, "it appears there has been a change. The position was filled internally last night. Our apologies for the inconvenience." Before Maya could respond, Miss Harper added, "We will keep your resume on file." They both stood. Neither extended a handshake. Neither offered an escort, just a quiet, dismissive motion toward the door. Maya walked back through the lobby with her, heart steady but her breath shallow. The receptionist pretended to be deeply absorbed in her phone call. The quiet in the room seemed to follow Maya all the way into the elevator. No one thanked her for coming, but someone had seen everything. 7 floors above the lobby, in a private office lined with smoked glass. Someone stood with his arms folded and his jaw locked in place. Daniel Lewis had not moved since. The moment the receptionist picked up her phone, he watched the lobby, he watched the hallway, he watched his wife walk through a building she believed was simply hosting her for an interview. He knew the truth. Avery Holt Consulting was already under new ownership, his ownership, and he had intentionally kept that detail quiet. 3 days earlier, he finalized the acquisition. He had spent months analyzing the company's internal structure. The numbers were strong, the profits solid. But he had also noticed something else. A noticeable lack of diversity in leadership, hiring, patterns that repeated themselves, and a culture built around familiarity instead of merit. He wanted to see how honest the company would be when it did not know who was watching. Maya had offered to avoid the interview. Entirely he asked her to go, not to test her, to test them. And now he had his answer. He replayed the last 2 minutes of audio. Aaron's voice, Harper's tone, the dismissal disguised as professionalism. Daniel stood in silence for a moment and pressed a button on the panel near his desk. "Bring human resources to my office at 11. 45 all managers." The assistant on the intercom hesitated. "All managers, sir." "Yes, all." Below him. The city of Phoenix moved through the day with no idea a different storm was building inside that building. And Maya, walking toward her car, had no idea the story had only just begun. She reached the parking garage feeling as if every step carried the weight of something she could not name yet. Not regret. Not anger. Something heavier. Something familiar. Something she thought she had left behind years ago. Maya unlocked her silver sedan and sat inside. Without starting the engine, the quiet settled around her like a second skin. The sunlight streamed through the concrete openings above, laying soft lines across her dashboard. She stared straight ahead for a moment, breathing in slowly, grounding herself. Her lipstick still perfect, her blazer still sharp, her hair still neatly pinned. And yet inside something felt bruised. She had worked in brand strategy for 15 years, guided 5 major product launches, helped corporations rebuild their customer identity. No one had ever questioned whether she applied for the right job. No one had ever spoken to her like she was misplaced in the room. But today they did. Not because of her experience, not because of her skills, but because of the assumptions they carried before she even opened her mouth. She rested her hands in her lap and reminded herself why she took the career break. Her mother's illness was not a pause. It was a responsibility, a chapter of love and exhaustion and resilience. When her mother passed 4 months earlier, the silence in the house felt unbearable. She spent weeks rediscovering her routine, waking up without checking medication reminders, cooking for 1 instead of 2, relearning the world at her own pace. One evening, she looked across the dinner table at Daniel and said she was ready. He had not asked what she meant. He simply reached across the table, took her hand, and said she deserved what would come next. She believed him. She always did. Her phone buzzed. A message from him. Heading home soon. Stay where you are for a bit. No punctuation. That meant he was focused. That meant something was unfolding upstairs that she didn't yet see. She wanted to call him. Wanted to vent. Wanted to laugh dryly and say he had been right about the way some companies showed their true colors. but something told her to wait. She felt it in her chest. This story wasn't finished. She reached into the passenger seat, grabbed her small notebook, and opened it. On the inside cover were 4 words she had written months ago, during a late night of grief and clarity. Your presence is power. She traced the letters lightly, then closed the notebook, placed it aside, and exhaled. Upstairs. The storm she sensed was already gathering force. Aaron was halfway through his lunch, a turkey sandwich and a lukewarm soda, when a notification flashed across his screen. Mandatory HR meeting? 11:45. Conference Suite 1. Attendance required. He frowned, wiped his hands on a napkin, and called down the hall. Harper, you get that message? Ruth Harper stepped out of her office, adjusting the cuffs of her blouse. Yes. About 10 minutes ago. Any idea what this is? Probably compliance updates or merger paperwork. They always do this when new ownership comes in. Aaron shrugged. He had been through mergers before. HR meetings didn't scare him. They usually amounted to nothing more than new policy slides and reminders about paperwork no one ever read. But today's meeting was not about paperwork. It was about consequences. Behind a locked door on the 10th floor, Daniel stood at the head of the long conference table with 2 HR directors beside him. They were both seasoned professionals who looked like they already sensed something serious was about to unfold. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them sat. Daniel kept his gaze on the doorway in a calm, unreadable silence. Do they know? He asked quietly. The junior analyst beside him nodded. They think this is procedural. Good. He clasped his hands behind his back and breathed in once. Not to calm himself. To ground his intention. What he witnessed that morning was not an accident. It was a pattern. One he had seen many times throughout his own career. One he had sworn he would uproot anywhere he had the authority to do so. At 11:43, Aaron walked through the door. At 11:44, Harper followed. They entered mid-conversation, something about a misprinted client brief. Their voices fell silent when they saw Daniel at the table. There were no papers in front of him. No projector. No welcome speech. Only stillness. Aaron cleared his throat. Were we told what this meeting is regarding? You were not, Daniel said. You will be. The HR director opened a folder and laid out a stack of internal transcripts. These are records from this morning's interview with an external candidate. Specifically the 10 o'clock appointment with Ms. Maya Lewis. Aaron blinked in confusion. Harper lifted her chin. I thought that appointment was canceled. It was not. The second HR director stepped forward. The interview was recorded in accordance with the firm's updated equity review policies. Audio and observation. Logs confirmed that the evaluation process did not align with stated company standards. Harper crossed her arms. Are we being accused of something? Daniel stepped forward, slow and deliberate. You are being given the chance to explain your decisions. He let the words land. You interviewed a candidate who exceeded every qualification listed in your posting. Yet you questioned her legitimacy. You questioned her experience. You questioned her right to be in the room you were hired to hold fairly. Aaron swallowed. We received a late internal candidate. The timing was tight. The timing was after the interview began, Daniel said, which makes your explanation inaccurate. Harper shifted, her voice breaking slightly at the edges. She did not seem like the right fit. Her background had gaps. Gaps she clearly documented on her resume, Daniel replied. Gaps explained by caretaking. Gaps that should never be used as a quiet elimination tool. Neither of them spoke. Daniel watched them both for a long moment. Tell me, what exactly did you see when she walked into the room? Because whatever it was not her resume. Silence again. Here is what will happen now. A complete audit of your hiring history is underway. Every candidate dismissed. Every candidate considered. Every pattern reviewed. And when the formal leadership announcement is released next week, your names will not be on it. Harper's head snapped up. Wait, this is not personal. It is not, Daniel said. It is structural. And I refuse to let structural issues hide behind polite excuses. He stepped back, no anger in his eyes, only clarity. Downstairs, Maya started her car. She still had no idea that the building she had just left was already changing. Because of her? Because she walked in with presence. And because the right person finally saw what had been ignored for too long, and somewhere between those two floors, the story shifted. The company was not done with her story, but she was getting ready to reclaim it. Maya drove out of the garage slowly, letting the sunlight wash over the windshield as if the brightness could clear the heaviness sitting in her chest. She reached the edge of the exit ramp before stopping again. The steering wheel felt warm beneath her palms. Her breath felt heavy but steady. She wasn't defeated. She was disappointed. There was a difference, a very real one. She glanced at her phone. Still no reply from Daniel beyond his earlier message. She knew that meant he was in motion. When his words were blunt and without punctuation, he was not thinking casually. He was moving with intention. She backed out of the ramp, circled the lot once, and parked again. Something told her not to leave. Something told her that the part of the story she had just lived through was only the surface. Meanwhile, inside the building, Harper and Aaron stepped out of the conference room, feeling the temperature shift around them, like the oxygen had changed, like the walls were listening. Aaron whispered under his breath, "What is happening?" Harper didn't answer. Her jaw was locked tight. She walked quickly, almost hiding her face as she passed to employees who had clearly overheard enough to start whispering the moment. She was out of sight by the time they entered the elevator. It was clear neither of them fully understood what they had triggered. And behind them, the HR directors began gathering documents in a quiet hurry, as if the building had suddenly turned into a place where mistakes finally mattered. Upstairs, Daniel closed the conference room door behind him and exhaled. Not out of frustration, but out of certainty. He knew what needed to happen next. He had seen enough corporate harm covered in polite language to recognize what this moment required: accountability, transparency, and correction. He checked his phone and saw Maya's message from earlier. "Heading out now." He typed back, "Stay close. I am calling you up in a few minutes." He slipped the phone into his pocket and walked down the hallway with a calm that felt almost too controlled. Because beneath that calm, something inside him was burning. Not anger, not revenge. Something far more powerful. A refusal to tolerate what he had seen happen to good people for far too long. Downstairs, Maya stepped out of the car again. She stood quietly for a moment, looking up at the tall building she had just left. It looked different now, as if it held secrets behind its mirrored glass. She smoothed the sleeves of her blazer, took a slow breath, and walked back inside. This time, the receptionist did not scan her like an intruder. She stood quickly, as if startled. Her tone softened. "Can I help you?" Maya nodded. "I was told someone is expecting me," before the young woman could respond. An employee from the internal team hurried forward. "Ms. Lewis, right this way." He sounded respectful, measured, almost nervous. Maya followed him through a private hallway she hadn't noticed earlier. A quieter space, warmer lighting. Walls lined with framed awards and client success letters. She felt something shift inside her. Not confidence. She never lost that. This was something else. A rising clarity. They reached a room with wide windows overlooking the city. The door opened, and Daniel stood inside waiting for her. He looked at her the way he always did when he needed the truth. Steady, searching, protective. For a second, neither of them spoke. Something in the silence held weight. A shared understanding. Then he gave a small nod. Not a smile. Not reassurance. Just a signal, "You're safe here." She stepped into the room. 4 executives sat at the table. 2 HR directors and 1 legal representative, all waiting. Not out of politeness. Out of consequence, Daniel spoke first. "I would like you to meet Maya Lewis, brand strategist. 15 years of proven impact. A candidate who walked in this morning expecting a fair evaluation, and instead met barriers no one here has justified." Maya did not shrink. She stepped forward, her gaze steady. I want to clarify something. I was not looking for special treatment when I applied. I was looking for a fair opportunity. Nothing more. One of the executives adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable. Another looked at her with rising guilt. Maya continued. I stepped away from my career to care for my mother. I do not apologize for that. I will never apologize for that. What I won't tolerate is being reduced to a gap. On a resume used to dismiss me without real consideration, her voice held no tremor. Only truth. Clean and direct. Daniel stepped back, giving her the room. She didn't need prompting. She needed space. And he knew that. One of the executives spoke up. Her name was Linda, an operations director with earnest eyes. Lewis. I cannot defend what happened downstairs, and I won't try. But I want to ask something without presumption. If given a leadership opportunity here, would you still want it? The room went still. Maya paused. Not because she didn't know the answer, because the moment deserved a breath. Then she said quietly, I walked in today hoping for a chance. What I received was clarity. I don't need to work where I'm evaluated through a lens I didn't ask for. I am not a maybe. I am not someone to take a chance on. I am an investment. A proven one. Daniel's eyes softened, pride flickering beneath his calm exterior. She looked at him. We good? He nodded. Always, she turned and walked out of the room. She didn't rush. She didn't glance back. But the air around her felt different. Not because of the room. Because of her, she left a company scrambling to rebuild the truth she had exposed. But her next steps were not about them. They were about her, and the next chapter was already forming in her. Mind that the next morning arrived with a tension that swept through the entire building long before most. Employees had even settled at their desks. A quiet hum of uncertainty filled every hallway. People spoke in soft tones. People checked their emails twice. Something had shifted. Everyone could feel it. At 8:43. Inboxes across Avery Holt Consulting lit up with a subject line that spread like wildfire through the cubicles. Leadership update and organizational shift. Employees opened it expecting polite corporate language. Maybe news about new branding. Maybe new protocols for the merger. What they saw instead was a message signed directly by the new owner. Daniel Lewis had introduced him not with grand statements but with clear decisions. Immediate review of the hiring division. Full audit of recruitment practices for the past 6 years. Temporary transfer of all hiring responsibilities to a third-party consulting team. In one line that made entire teams glance up from their screens in shock, 2 department heads, Aaron Dale and Ruth Harper, were no longer with the company. No reasons listed. No soft phrasing. Just finality. The whispers traveled fast. Did something happen yesterday? Why those 2? What did the new owner find? People stopped pretending everything was fine. They sensed accountability in the air, and it made some nervous and others relieved. Down on the HR floor, doors were closed. Phones rang more than usual. Managers exchanged looks they didn't want to talk about out loud. For years, the company had moved as if patterns were harmless. Now those patterns were under a microscope. Upstairs, Daniel kept his office door open. Not as a gesture of friendliness, as a message. No hiding, no silence. Not anymore. He scrolled through a message on his phone, then leaned back. Maya had sent him a short text from earlier that morning. Heading out to run errands? Everything good with you? He smiled faintly. She always checked on him when she felt a storm brewing. He typed a reply. All good. We'll update you later. At 3:10, Linda from operations knocked on his door. She stepped inside with a calm expression that seemed more sincere than the usual corporate polish. She set a folder on his desk. She turned us down. Daniel looked up. Good. Linda raised a brow. You expected that? He nodded. She deserves more than a rushed offer made out of fear. She deserves the space to choose for herself. Linda understood. She didn't argue. She didn't push. She simply nodded and left the room. But as she walked out, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Respect for leadership at that exact moment. Across town in a small cafe tucked between a florist and a bookstore, Maya sat by a window with her laptop open. A cup of steaming tea sat beside her. She wasn't thinking about Avery Holt Consulting anymore. Not in anger. Not in frustration. Not even in hope. She was thinking about what came next. Her next chapter. Her next creation. 2 nights earlier, she had stayed up late sketching an idea on scrap paper. A firm built on brand storytelling and strategic direction. Built with intention. Built with clarity. Built with values companies talked about but rarely honored. She would call it Rising Point Strategies. Daniel had loved the name. He said it sounded like motion, like strength stepping into view. Her phone buzzed with an email. A former colleague had reached out asking if she was open to consulting. Then another. Then another. People she had worked with 10 years ago. People who valued her insight. People who remembered her work even when a company refused to see it. She couldn't help smiling. Not because of the opportunities. Because she felt something inside herself. She had not felt in a while. Momentum. The barista approached her table with a fresh cup. Here you go. On the house. Maya blinked. Sorry, I didn't order another. The barista smiled gently. My aunt works in the same building you visited yesterday. She told me everything. Said you handled it with more dignity than most people ever do. She wanted me to tell you she hopes you know your worth. Maya paused, touched in a way she didn't express out loud. She thanked the barista quietly. She picked up the cup and felt the warmth through her fingers. Somewhere between the aroma of the tea and the quiet hum of the cafe, she realized something important. Her story wasn't ending. It was expanding. Back at home later that evening, she stood at the kitchen counter slicing ginger for tea. The scent of herbs drifted through the room. The soft clinking of a spoon echoed as she prepared the pot. Daniel stepped into the room, leaning against the fridge. He watched her in silence for a moment, measuring her mood like he always did. You know, he said, when I asked you to go to that interview? I know, she replied. You were testing them. He chuckled under his breath. I honestly didn't expect them to fail that hard. Not with everything being recorded. She placed the ginger slices into the pot. The tea hissed as they hit the simmering water. That's the problem, she said softly. People assume their habits go unnoticed. They count on silence from the people they overlook. He stepped behind her and placed a hand on her back. You didn't stay silent. Even in that boardroom. I've never seen you that composed. Still doesn't mean silent, she said. They stood together for a long, quiet moment. Not a heavy silence. A full one. He glanced at her. They offered you the job, didn't they? She turned off the stove. They did. And I told them I had a better one lined up. Daniel's eyes softened. Have you named it? Rising Point Strategies. He nodded. Strong. Clear. Yours. She poured the tea into 2 mugs and handed him one. Her voice softened. Do you ever think that the people who teach us to stay patient are the same ones who hope we stay quiet? Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The quiet between them carried the truth she already knew. The doorbell rang. Maya wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the door. She opened it to find Linda standing on the porch holding a plain envelope. Her expression was sincere. Not rehearsed. Not corporate. Human. I didn't want to send this by email, Linda said. It's a formal acknowledgement of how things were handled. A written apology and a signed statement from the board. Maya didn't take the envelope immediately. Linda continued. I know it doesn't erase anything, but we wanted you to have proof that we saw everything. All of it. Maya looked at her steadily. That's a start. Respect doesn't come in a folder. Linda nodded. I understand. She stepped back, then paused. For what it's worth, people are shaken. Not because of you, because they finally feel seen. Maya offered a small nod, then closed the door. In the kitchen, Daniel sat scrolling through his phone. Anything new? She asked. Actually, yes. Someone from Mason Ridge Partners messaged me about you. Said they heard you're stepping back into the field. Maya smiled. Tell them I don't step into fields anymore. I build my own now. Daniel laughed quietly. I'll let them know. They settled at the table, sipping tea in the warm glow of the kitchen light. No bitterness. No frustration. Only clarity. Maya didn't get justice from that interview. She got something stronger. The freedom to choose her own path. To create her own space. To define her story without waiting for a seat someone else controlled. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She walked out and built her own door. Somewhere out there, someone else was being overlooked. Someone else was being underestimated. Someone else was being dismissed before they even spoke. And when they heard her story, they would know one thing. They deserved to be seen too. The night deepened around the house, but inside the quiet felt steady rather than heavy. Maya sat at the kitchen table long after the tea cooled. Her laptop open again, her fingers moving slowly as she mapped the first stage of her new firm. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't forcing anything. She was building with intention. Every line she typed felt like a step forward. Daniel walked in and set a folder beside her. Financial projections, brand development templates, legal documents. She'd need when she officially registered Rising Point Strategies. She looked up at him with soft gratitude. You didn't have to do all that, I know, he said. But I wanted to. The world makes things heavier than they need to be. You don't need extra weight right now, she smiled at him. It's the kind of smile you give someone who knows you deeply. Then she turned back to her work with a quiet focus that felt like purpose returning to her veins. The next day, she walked into a co-working space downtown to claim the small office she'd signed for. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it felt right. An empty room with a window and a door she owned, a place where she didn't have to wait to be invited. She set her notebook on the desk, ran her hand across its scratchy wooden surface, and exhaled. It felt like the first real breath she had taken all week. Back at Avery Holt Consulting, the fallout continued. The audit team moved quietly but thoroughly. Patterns emerged in black and white. Emails, interview notes, hiring comparisons.
Anything down expected was confirmed.
The company hadn't stumbled into bias. It had lived there for years. Some employees were shocked. Some avoided eye contact. Some took a long look in the mirror. Anyone who came face to face with their mistakes had a choice. Grow or retreat. But no one could pretend anymore. By Friday, the building no longer carried the same false sense of structure. There was honesty in the air now. Raw, uncomfortable honesty. Something that had been missing for far too long. Meanwhile, at her small new office, Maya was building momentum. A former client scheduled a meeting with her as 2 startups requested consultations. A business owner she had helped years ago sent a referral. It wasn't luck. It was everything she planted returning to her in its own time. That afternoon, after finishing a brand assessment call, she stepped outside for fresh air. The sun was warm on her face. The traffic hummed around her. She closed her eyes and breathed in the moment. Not relief, not triumph. Something steadier, a sense of being exactly where she needed to be. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. My name is Jenna from Redstone Media Group. We heard you're taking on new clients. Are you available for a consultation next week? She laughed softly to herself, not out of surprise, out of timing, out of confirmation, out of the realization that her new path was already choosing her back. That evening, she and Daniel sat on the porch with dinner plates balanced on their laps, watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky. He turned to her quietly. How does it feel? She didn't answer right away. She looked at the skyline. At the tall buildings, at the one she had walked into thinking she needed their validation, and she said, It feels like I stopped waiting for doors that were never meant for me, and finally built one I could walk through without shrinking. Daniel nodded slowly. Pride lived behind his eyes, but so did something else. Respect. The kind of respect earned, not given. She leaned her head on his shoulder. The world kept moving, cars rushing, and conversations echoing faintly from passing sidewalks. But for them, time felt still. The next morning, she woke up early, made coffee, and sat at the dining table with her laptop. The light coming through the window was soft, warm, hopeful. She drafted her official announcement, A quiet introduction. Not to impress anyone, not to prove herself. Just to say she was here, present, ready. Before she could press send, another message appeared. This one from an old mentor. Proud of you. Call me when you can. I want to talk about a partnership. She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she smiled. A full smile this time. Kind that comes from knowing life has a way of returning what is yours. She hit send on her announcement across the city. In an office that once dismissed her, managers opened their inboxes and read the news. Some sighed. Some felt a pang of regret. Some realized too late the opportunity they had let slip through their fingers. And somewhere in that building, someone whispered quietly, "We should have seen her." But Maya wasn't thinking about them anymore. She was thinking about the people she could help, the brands she could build, the stories she could reshape, the voices that needed someone who understood what it felt like to be overlooked and still rise, not through revenge, not through rage, through clarity, through confidence, through creating her own table when the old ones were never meant to hold her. Maya didn't walk away empty-handed. She walked away with a future that belonged entirely to her, and somewhere someone who hears her story today will understand something they have forgotten. They deserve to be seen too. They deserve to be respected. They deserve to build something that reflects who they are, not by waiting, not by pleading, but by standing and choosing themselves. If her journey teaches anything, it is this. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks out of the wrong room, builds the right one from the ground up.